All right, so I guess this is officially the first episode. I'm Christy. I'm your host of the New Black. Um, I finally put out the teaser slash intro, so I had a um a good friend date with one of my very good friends. Um, we always have very stimulating conversation, and so we were having us little happy hour, oysters, sparkling wine, and a few glasses in. I felt like I wanted to record, so I'm back. And we had some fun conversation as we usually do. And so I'm back home. I wrote some good notes on the one of the thousands of notebooks she gave me earlier this week. Y'all, that girl had thousands of notebooks just hoarded. So now I have 500 because she insisted that I take some. But it's coming in handy. I wrote jotted some notes down really quick. But yeah, so I'm kind of just doing this as I feel inspired or feel like talking, and I feel like talking today. So here we are. So I came home. I've poured me a drink, if you can hear it. Tonight we are a bit on the looks scale. I made a quick drink, easy and simple, and it actually tastes really good. We used one of my favorite vodkas, Purity 51. It's organic, like water, amazing, which is good. I had sparkling wine, so I didn't want to go too far. A splash of the Fever Tree elder flower tonic water, and a little bit of those things from, if you get those Instagram ads from a Haas, um the lemon lavender. It's really good, so I put a splash of that. So it's the perfect, kind of gentle cocktail, nothing crazy. Keep the party going. It's Thursday, so we might as well. And I might need it. This one might get a little heavy, not too heavy though. I'm gonna try to keep it as light as possible. Um, but yeah, so it's funny because I started the year in the mindset of operating solely in love, doing everything in love. That's been at the forefront of my mind, and so I've been keeping that energy even in my manifestations and my affirmations. It's all about love, doing everything in love for other people, thinking about my own love life and moving in love and figuring out, my own love shit. I think this was befitting, and I was inspired because if you watch This Is Us, I've been obsessed since season 1. So if you watch, and this is not really a spoiler if you haven't seen it yet, on the last episode, or this week's episode, we kind of explored the topics of first loves or first experiences in love. And we kind of touched on Uncle Nicky's experience, and we touched on Deja's. I'm not going to get into who these characters are. If you don't watch the show, I suggest you just go watch it. But if you watch, then you know who these people are, and you already know their stories, kind of. So I won't dig too deep. But Uncle Nicky's experience, I can't really relate. He's old. He's a white man. Nothing to do with me. But Deja, as a young black girl, being in love for the first time, it took me back to my first experience, and I even talked about it with my friend at dinner tonight. that experience is so unique, but still kind of shared, because the thing about that first love is that it's so simple. So simple. Like, there's almost no requirements for being in love for the first time. I mean, none. It's hardly any. Do you like this person? Do you think they're fine? Do you like spending time with them? Do they make you laugh? It don't matter if they have a car, a house, a job. None of that matters. It don't matter what they're going to be doing in life. It doesn't matter. It's the first time you love someone kind of unconditionally, because you don't really care what else they got going on. It's based on pure attraction. And it's nothing like it. And so it got me thinking about my first experience in love. And mine was beautifully tragic. To sum it up in so many words, that's what I have. Beautifully tragic. And it's a lot to unpack here a little bit. And it really got me to thinking about my experiences in the last 14 years and how I've dealt with relationships and dating. And it kind of affected me. So, a lot of first loves are kind of over romanticized, especially in teen dramas and stuff like that. But for a lot of us, that first love experience can be really fucking complicated. So, I'll jump into mine. Like I said, beautifully tragic. Like most of us, the first love kind of started in probably around freshman year, like ninth grade. And it started out rocky from a teenage standpoint. I had kind of had a crush on somebody else. You know how you had that thing? I was a late bloomer too, y'all. So while your girl is, giving what it needs to give now, I was chubby and had baby fat. And then one summer between 7th and 8th grade, probably, I had, you hit that puberty growth spurt, and then you got all the curves. So I've been curvy my whole life. Hit all the curves, and you go from that awkward duckling, because I won't say ugly, just awkward, to like a little swan, you giving a little something. And so by 9th grade, I was giving the tea, But yeah, so started like any other. There was lots of complications though in the end, but this was my first love. He was chocolate and tall, and he was a football player, and beautiful white teeth, black as night, gorgeous. What you would imagine if you read The Coldest Winter Ever. You remember Midnight? He was probably Midnight in real form. I think that's the easiest way to describe it. Kind of street, kind of not. Everything you could think of, he was that. So, yeah, if you read The Coldest Winter Ever, he was Midnight, y'all. Think about what you thought Midnight was and swooned over, and he was that. So, I was wrapped up, swept up, all in love. In the midst of all that, we were pretty on, off, mostly on, about 2 years or so. And then as I was getting ready to go to college, I had to get my shit together. So it was like, I don't know about this. I'm starting the best part of my life, and that's going to college, getting free, And so I was like, I'm not going to do this. I don't have time to take this drama into my next phase or journey. And so, we broke up. We split ways. And, it was annoying normal love story. I'll maybe go deeper another time, but I just kind of want to hit on the points here. um, and so I went on about my way. We went our separate ways. He was a year ahead of me. So he had different stuff going on. I ended up going to college. I went to UGA, go Dogs. We just won the national championship, so I have to acknowledge that. But I left for college. You leave for college around August. I have been in school a couple of weeks. So I'm still pretty new. I don't really know anybody. And I actually go home for the weekend. I can't remember what the occasion was, but I was home for the weekend. Ironically, my mama was out of town that weekend visiting her boyfriend. Again, another story for another day. But yeah. So I'm home. I'm kicking it with my friends. I'm still relatively new to the college experience. Like I said, this was probably September. I left for school in August. And I found out he was murdered. So, again, this is where things get a little heavy, y'all. But I promise I'm going to bring it back up. So, I found out he was murdered. Now, ironically, he had messaged me the night before and was like, yeah, I'm going to get my life together for you, etc., etc. I'm going to get right. He was down visiting his friend in college, and there was a party, there was a fight, gunshots, you know the rest. And before all this, he sent me a message randomly, hadn't talked to him in months. And yeah, it was that. The next morning I woke up, my mama called me like probably 8 o'clock in the morning, because Facebook was still kind of in then, it was still for college people, but I think it had just became for regular people too. And she wanted me to hear from her before I saw it on Facebook or something. My best friend at the time didn't want to tell me, so she told my mama. And yeah, that's how I found out. So it was pretty intense. So things took a pretty tragic turn in my love story. I remember my first love very fondly, but there was a lot of, even for somebody so young, it was a lot of unfinishedness. And again, that made me think about us as Black girls and how even our teen should be so innocent, should be so special, so simple. These experiences in our first become so complicated sometimes. Like, that's complicated as fuck, y'all. Because I'm not with this person anymore, but this person shared such a huge part of my life, like, for that time period. And even though that was so long ago, I never realized how tough that weighed on my psyche to lose somebody so tragically like that. Especially since I come from a family where I didn't even really know anybody who had died. My family is pretty young. Like, my parents are 20 years older than me. My parents are only 20 years older than them. So everybody's pretty young. Like, all of my grandparents are still alive. And that's something I say as a blessing. Most people don't experience that, but every one of my grandparents is still alive to this day. Thank God. I don't know how many. That's probably like a 1 in a million, not a 1 in a million, but like a 1 in 100, 1 in a 10,000 experience. Like, every last one. I'm 33. And it's an experience that I share solely alone, but the tragedy that sometimes can be experiences we have as black women and black girls so young can be crazy. And so that was just a weird time for me, because then that happened. I remember my grandma came over, who, my granny is my girl, y'all. My mom's mom is my girl. And she came over, she made breakfast. All my friends at the time, like my best friend circle at the time, came over. We had breakfast together, we cried. And even then, as an 18-year-old girl, I felt the need to be strong for them. So I didn't even cry in front of them. I think about that moment, I didn't even cry in front of them. I cried on the phone with my mama. I cried with my granny. And then they got there and they cried in my arms, and I didn't even cry with them. And that's something wild to me to think about now as a grown woman, almost, or just 33. I ain't gonna say I'm almost 35. That's a stretch. I just turned 33. And so I think about that because it kind of was one of those first times where I put the burden on myself to have to be a strong black woman, I guess. And I don't even know why. Like, it was the first time. And I went back to school Monday. Like nothing happened. Again, I didn't really know anybody at school. School had just started, so I didn't really know the girls. Like we tight now. A lot of us are still tight now, but then I don't really know them like that. I did not know them. So I went back to school and I didn't even talk about it with anybody. I didn't even tell anybody what had happened. Nobody there knew what had happened to me, I don't think. And my friends were back home. They're kind of grieving with each other, and I didn't really have anybody. I don't even think, with the exception of my one friend who me and her still, we're still cool now. The rest of them, I didn't even hear from them. And so I kind of just dealt with it alone. I didn't tell anybody that was there. Cause I was like, I don't know these bros like that. I ain't about to have them all in my business. I probably didn't tell them till like at least a month or two later. But the special thing about that was, and we'll talk about friendships on another episode, a lot of them, or a few of them, kind of could see something was going on with me. So they would just be like, hey girl, let's go. Let's get out of the room. Let's go, whatever. And we would get in the mix. And that helped. But I never really sat down and talked about the pain that I was going through or sitting through with anybody. I never did. Not my mama, not my best friend, not anybody I went to school with, not a therapist, nobody. I didn't even admit it to myself how bad it was. And I went to the funeral and I cried and cried and cried. My best friend was there for me, and that was it. And after that, it's like I shut it out and I never talked about it again. And me and my mom had a lot of conversations about it later. But I still never really talked about how hurt I really was. Probably until right now. Or no, I'll say another time. There was one of my very best friends now. This was again freshman year, so again, she didn't know me like that. And eventually we got to a point where I confided in her what happened to me, because I had heard that she had lost her boyfriend like right after graduation in a car accident. So she kind of knew what I was going through, and when I confided in her about it, we kind of built a bond, I think, from there, because she really didn't have anybody who understood what she was experiencing either. And it's such a fragile time. You're so young, just going through something like that. It's just weird. And to this day, I understand her probably better than most people. But anywho, um, yeah. Even now, I don't know. This may be the first time I really sat down and really talked about it in front of people, even my friends. I don't know if we even really sat down and dug deep into this. And I know some other girls may have went through this too. But for this part of my life, as I've been doing a lot of work trying to get myself prepared for, I guess, a long-term relationship or whatever I'm preparing for, y'all, I don't really know. I don't really know. That's a whole nother thing, which I'm sure we'll get into at some point. But yeah. And so I really didn't think about this until maybe 2 times in life after that. One time, the first time, which is random, was when I watched the movie Moonlight. The main character in Moonlight, the guy who played him, who is gorgeous, I can't remember his name, but he reminded me of my ex. And watching that, I broke down crying because it made me feel something, and I didn't know what. Something, though. And then the second time was after I got out of my last relationship, which was somebody who was he had a similar story to my ex who passed away. Like mother issues, abandonment stuff, like they had a very similar story. And after the relationship was over, because it was crazy, and we'll talk about that later too, I realized that I was kind of living a continuation of the experience from that first relationship in this one, if that makes sense. Like, it was wild. Like, it was kind of giving me a view of, had I continued that relationship, how it really would have played out with that. So it wasn't until my last relationship that I actually started to get into therapy and doing some of the work and started to actually unpack a lot of that stuff. And I'll tell y'all how I found some unusual healing. So, long story short, I was on some dating apps. I had been out of my relationship for a few months at this point, and I was like, I'm ready to get back out there. So I got on a dating app, and usually I don't swipe right on people that I know in real life, whether I've known this person from like high school or my hometown, or we met in person once before, we follow each other on Instagram or Facebook, whatever. If I know you in some sort of way, then I usually don't swipe right. Swipe left. Because I feel like if we were supposed to be together, then we would have been at a different point in time. Sorry, y'all, I had to take a sip because, woo. But this time I decided to do the thing I would never do and swipe right. And now the complicated part about this is, and mind you, at this point, y'all, it's 14 years later. This happened to me essentially 2007 is when my first love passed away. And this is 2021. So, or it's 2020. So it's about almost 14 years later. And we all know high school. In that, these the first love matters, but this far, but it's like, it's whatever. So I swipe right on this guy I know from back home, and he happens to be my first love's best friend from then. I mean, it's 14 years later. The man is gone, been gone for a decade and a half almost at this point. So This was his best friend at the time. And he was actually the last person who saw him alive because they were together the night he was murdered. And I typically wouldn't have swiped right, but for whatever reason, I decided to. And I went on a date with this man, y'all. And honestly, it's not my proudest moment because I did end up ghosting him, y'all. But that is another story for another day. But we went on a date and everything was cool. He was a gentleman. He was the type of man I typically would date. Respectable, honorable, full gentleman. Handled everything. Picked me up. It was everything. He did nothing wrong. I was dead ass wrong for ghosting him, but that's another. Like I said, we'll get into that when I get deeper into my dating shit, but that's later. But I had been in therapy for a few months too at this time, and we had a normal date, had a good time, went to a nice place, had great drinks, food, we had a great time. And after a few hours of digging deep, well, kind of, I ain't gonna say digging deep. Actually, after a few hours of the usual dating banter, we get into it. And we finally tap into the part where he kind of discussed that his version of his last night with my first love. And then I share my version of his last night as well. I wasn't with him, but again, I will never forget that night. And so, he shares and I share. Like I said, the night it happened, he sent me a text message that night before and was like, yeah, I'm getting my life together, blah, 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 blah. And I want us to be together. I want us to work it out, etc. A typical love story, a typical teen love story. And that night, from his perspective, he gave it to me. And that perspective was, he really was. He had come down to college, had seen how it was, and was like, yeah, man, this is great. This is good. This is cool. And had kind of made up his mind that he did want to do something better. They had talked about it. He had sold him on the dream. Everything was cool. They went out. And unfortunately, he just didn't make it. Got in the fight. Somebody retaliated. He lost his life. And in 14 years, I had never had this conversation or got any kind of closure on this, really. And I never even shared my real thoughts with anybody. But sitting across from this man at dinner allowed me to do just that. And that was probably one of the most cathartic things I could have ever done. And once I did that, it opened up a whole lot of healing for me. So I say all that to say, unfortunately for Black girls, even something as simple as and as innocent as your first love can be something that can be so painful and can drag on for years and decades of your life and affect how you date, how you move, how you emote, how you open up or don't open up to people. And the healing can come from the most unusual places. And that date was one of the most unusual places. Like I said, what happened after, I'm not proud of. But, it is what it is. But I will say, even something that far in your past, baby girl, you gotta heal. Okay? And that's what I learned. I had to fucking heal because I was holding on to that hurt and that pain, and I had never let that go. And unfortunately, it took me damn near 14 years to figure that out. And on top of that, a very, very shitty relationship trying to subconsciously, I guess, live out what should have happened there. And I'm not saying that he would have been my forever or whatever, but not learning that lesson eventually found me later. So, yeah, this kind of feels like a random rambling, but if you can relate, then you get the point, I think. And now I finally feel like I'm in a place where I'm starting to heal. At least from that, I'm certainly healed, and I don't need to relive that in any form or fashion ever again. But it brings me to why I started the New Black and the Brand New Life in general, is that even the most innocent experiences for Black women can get so complicated. They can get so complicated. And even through that, we still keep pushing. So that's my random story about first loves and I guess a little bit of loss. And I hope I kept it light. I tried to keep it kind of light because that is kind of an intense story. But yeah. So to wrap it up, my word of the week: healing. Yeah, my word of the week is healing. And I wish that for all of you. It's amazing and it's sometimes crazy how much we push down and push down and push down. And we don't even realize we really need to heal it until it's way too late. And so I just encourage you to start figuring out how to unpack that shit before you too late and you too deep into some random relationship to get out of it. So I pray healing for whatever it is that's holding you in the back of your mind, the front of your mind, and your subconscious, hurting you, causing you pain that you didn't realize. And don't be afraid to share. I think a lot of times we are afraid, because I know I've been afraid to just say and open up and even share things, even with my own friends, with my mom, my family, just in general. I've been afraid to do it. And so I've decided that I'm not going to be afraid anymore. And I want y'all to be the same way. So that's all I got. So that's episode 1. I hope you all enjoyed it. And let me know in the comments or on Instagram or wherever people leave comments on this. I don't know. I'm still figuring that out. But I'll leave my socials and things somewhere so we can figure it out. And y'all leave y'all comments. I asked a question on Instagram about people's first love experiences and lessons, and so I'm going to share those on Instagram. So if you're not following me, come over there and follow me and let's discuss. But yeah, I hope y'all come back for the next episode. I don't know what it's going to be about, but hopefully you come back and see. So thanks for listening. Bye, y'all.